I'm Tony Scott with bnetTV. We are here in Berlin at the Small Cell Global Congress. I am speaking with Mr. Joe Madden of Mobile Experts. How are you today, sir?
Yes, doing fine. Hi, Tony.
Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for gracing us here. For all the people out there in bnetTV land, why don't you give us a brief overview of what Mobile Experts is, what you're doing here at the Small Cell Global Congress?
Okay. Yeah, we're a small company. We're focused on small cells as a market research firm. So we publish forecasts looking out at the next 5 years of where small cell technology is going and make predictions about the size of the market, just how many are going to be deployed in which markets and how. And most of our customers are semiconductor suppliers and equipment suppliers that need some guidance on what to design for 2 years from now.
I always like to talk to the analysts because I like to get some of the highlights and bullet points out of some of your research.
Yeah, of course, and I can share a few of those bits with you. We're very focused on the carrier grade small cells. I've never been a believer in consumer femto, and in fact, consumer femtocells have really not been growing this year. The growth that we expected 3-4 years ago has not materialized, and what we're finding is that the carrier grade opportunity is much bigger. So I'm looking at into the range of 5 million carrier grade small cells per year by 2017.
So I'm going to sort of back up the bus here a little bit and talk about the femto, just because it is a case study, if you will, where the small cell arena was able to say, okay, let's put these femtos out into the market space. Let's see how they react and where some of the challenges might be for the enterprise grade or the enterprise solution arena. If I am correct in that assumption, what were some of those challenges, and what does that mean going forward?
Well, some of the first challenges we saw were performance things, technical things. Femtocells create interference, and so especially when you try to share the radio carrier with the macro layer, what you're doing is by putting a femtocell in your apartment, you're creating coverage problems for all your neighbors in the apartments above and below you and around you. And so that was one of the biggest problems that people saw early on. And one of the reasons why the operators really do not push consumer femtocells. You don't see TV ads saying, come get your femtocell. And I think that's going to continue in the consumer grade market because there's not a lot of investment going into solving those problems. When we go to the other two classes, I consider enterprise grade and then carrier grade to be two distinct segments from the consumer side. I think there will be higher capacity in each one, but also as we go into LTE, there will be a lot more technology put into making that coordination work out so that the interference problem goes away.
Let's talk about the LTE band or the spectrum arena when it comes to small cells, and what are some of the challenges that exist in implementing small cells into that ecosystem, and what some of the carriers are doing to sort of get through some of those?
Right. Well, one of the biggest issues is the business case right now. I mean, as we roll out LTE, the first thing you do is you put up macro towers, or you take your existing macro towers and you enable LTE on there. And when you do that, on the first day, you have excess capacity, so you don't actually need small cells right away. So I think there's a delay in the market that's going to happen because as we first introduce these LTE networks, we don't need small cells for another 2 years.
So that's a good point. If they are not needed for another 2 years, what is that next 24 months going to look like for the equipment manufacturers, for the chipset guys, and then for the carriers on implementation? What are they going to do for the next 2 years that is going to make that tipping point?
Well, okay, first of all, the thing we can do is we can practice. We do trials and things like that. The way this industry works is you always start with lab testing, then you go to something called a field trial, but you always do that in a small way at first. The real test is to go into what we call a loaded field trial, which would be, let's say, 1,000 small cells in a city, and trying to load down the core network and see how everything behaves together in a seriously loaded situation. And that hasn't happened yet anywhere in the world. So we need to go through about an 18-month process of trying out the technology in that way before we really know how it scales and how it works. The other thing we need to do is start deploying these small cells in hotspots. So, for example, there are places where LTE is already impacted in the United States with Verizon, in Korea, in Japan, where LTE has been up for a couple of years. There are certain cities and certain locations where LTE is at 80%, 90% of capacity, and we're very quickly reaching the limit. And so I think those will be our opportunities to throw in 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 small cells and start to solve those problems and begin scaling up.
What happens when you look at some of the international programs in different countries like the European Union or the United States where Congresses or particular governmental bodies have said, hey, everybody needs to be connected, everybody's got to have some broadband spectrum, everybody needs to have a throughput of a minimum of blank, and that blank has been anywhere between 2, 3, 5, 30, depending on the particular country. If the carriers and the infrastructure providers can't get that out there as fast as possible, and they're going to rely on small cells within the next year, doesn't that sort of start to break down that model of, hey, it's not going to happen for 2 years?
Yeah, well, I think the governments would like things to happen more quickly, but economics is really what rules at the end of the day. And I don't think that we're going to scale up so quickly because the cost isn't there. We need the chipsets to ramp up to volume. We need the software development during the trials to start to work so that we don't make the customers angry and have them give up on our LTE services altogether.
And then finally, Joe, if that's the case, then would you say then after the ensuing 24 months here, 2 years out, the ensuing time after that, do you think that the deployment is going to be much more dynamic? The throughputs are going to be better, and inevitably the customers are going to be happier because of the interoperability and scalability?
I do think customers will be happy after that. There is going to be a period of time where, as I said, we have excess capacity in the macro LTE network, and that'll be fine for a while. We're going to reach a point in time where the customers will start to notice the degradation of performance, just as you do with Wi-Fi now. Many locations you go in and you notice the Wi-Fi, it's really slow today. Everyone's had that experience, and we'll start to see that with LTE as well. And so that's when the operators will pull the trigger to begin investing in small cells, and then people will see that improvement again. I think it will be noticeable to the end user.
More OTT players equals more consumption, which equals less bandwidth.
Less bandwidth. Let's hope that equals more revenue for everyone. And so far, I don't see that with a lot of the OTT applications. So, yeah, not yet. But if the advertising starts to create a new stream of revenue, then I think that could be very helpful to the industry.
It's definitely a whole other topic of conversation, which I would love to enjoy with you at a later time. Finally, I have one last question for you, Joe. Why is it important to come to conferences like the Small Cell Global Congress?
This particular conference is great because there are a lot of operators here. For me, I circulate with semiconductor vendors all the time. I have a view of what's going on in the lab. I need to go and talk to the operators to get that top-down view of where they really want to go, what their priorities are. Are they prioritizing dense urban areas and capacity, or is it more about getting coverage? And so those kinds of questions of where is the industry going need to come from the operators.
Joe, thanks very much for taking the opportunity to speak with us. I hope we get a chance for an update again in the future.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tony.
Been speaking with Mr. Joe Madden of Mobile Experts here at the Small Cell Global Congress in Berlin. I am Tony Sklar with bnetTV.